Your city, your stories. Celebrating the people and places that make Houston shine. It's Great Day Houston.
When we come back, Westheimer, Kirby, Allen Parkway. We drive them, we sit in traffic on them, but who are the names behind the roadways? We'll reveal the stories behind Houston's most popular streets. As many of you know, Houston was founded back in 1836 by the Allen brothers along the Buffalo Bayou. What started as a small trading post quickly grew into one of the largest cities in the country. Over the decades, the city expanded outward, and today miles of roads connect us from downtown to the suburbs. But have you ever wondered about the names behind those streets? Celebrity historian Raffi Andonian takes us through the stories that paved the way for Houston's most famous roads. Raffi, when we look around us, everything has some history to it. One thing that a lot of us take for granted are street names. It came from somewhere or somebody.
That's right, and it's very local in some ways, and also it reflects the larger country or even empire at different points. Yep, very much local history.
Yeah. All right, so a lot of street names happen to be numbers. I think about New York City being one of the most famous for that.
Yes, and in Europe, you don't have a lot of numbers, but in the United States, as you point out in New York City, you have a lot of numbers. Part of the reason for that is because numbered streets are kind of a product of expansion west, although they existed in the East Coast as well, especially in larger population cities like New York City, like you point out, because in New York City, which is a large population place, a numbered system makes sense. You know, they have numbered avenues and numbered streets that intersect, so you always know where you are on that grid, if you will, and the grid system is something that takes off as you go west. So for example, if you go up in New England, you have very few numbered cities that exist. You know, it's something like in Vermont, it's less than 10% of streets, less than a fifth overall in New England actually have numbered streets. But as you go west, you get more like 65, 70, 80% of the cities have numbered streets in them, including Utah, which is a great example, which is 90+% is numbered. Part of the reason is because Mormons have a very organized culture, so that also helps contribute to that. But you're seeing the expansion of the grid because in the 1780s, there were land ordinances that were passed in the early republic that very much put the grid as a system of looking out. In fact, if you look at states, as you go towards the plains, you see that they're kind of a rectangular in shape, unlike in New England, unlike in Europe. That's what that's reflecting. So the sort of the way the states were plotted out kind of reflects into these towns and cities as well.
All right, and then there are those streets that have their names, and those names can come from everything.
They can come from everything, which is why, for example, in Europe, you have more names because it predates to the gridding of stuff, and names often honor places, honor people, and so the names often reflect the history and story of a place, as they do, of course, you know, here in Houston as well. Now, there's a variety of ways that you can name streets, and I kind of break it down into 5 categories. You have places, people, you have rivers, descriptions, and destinations. So places that are an example, like for example, River Road in Louisiana, which goes along the river. Or how about here, you have, of course, George Bush Turnpike, which also describes that, you know, turnpikes usually are paid because back in the colonial days, a turnpike, you would pay someone to actually turn the pike, believe it or not. So you also have people that streets are named after. George Bush is an example of that.
And then speaking of people in history, Allen Parkway.
Allen Parkway, of course, is named after the founding brothers that you have for Houston. About 2,000 acres, New York real estate, man. There's New York again. And of course, changed the history of Texas.
Yeah, and changed the history of our station.
That's right.
We had been there for over 57 years on Allen Parkway, which is also known for flooding, right? And finally, Harvey just took us out. And so our new address is on Westheimer.
German immigrants. So German immigration is a part of the Texas story. Westheimer is very reflective of that. Entrepreneurial. I also think very Texas is to be entrepreneurial. And he had 16 kids, started a school because he had all those kids. That school was on the site of what is now Lamar High School.
Yeah, and Westheimer is one of those roads that you can start on Westheimer like when the sun is rising and end on it when the sun is setting.
That's right.
It seems to be that long. Right?
That's right.
All right.
For the 16 kids he had, right?
River Oaks Boulevard, which is one of the most prominent neighborhoods in the country, really, and also the standard for the national model for community planning is in that River Oaks neighborhood.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon to have a well-established and kind of a luxurious neighborhood be named after these established trees, because it's kind of aspirational to be sort of a long-term, you know, well-established neighborhood. So I think it makes sense that that's the case. And I find sometimes funny how developments and themes fit together. For example, here in the Houston area, I see the There's Green Harvest that has Cool Cucumber Street inside that development. There's Jubilee Development. Inside it, you find Happy Home Street.
Yeah, Happy Home Street.
So there's all kinds of ways
Yeah,
developments
right?
can have fun with this and market it.
Yeah, okay. Kirby Drive.
Kirby is an industrial person of East Texas, had major lumber mills, and also was a founder of the Anti-Clan Association, the American Anti-Clan Association.
But the street is home to all kinds of things because it's also another long one. So you have, Upper Kirby with the high rises, and it runs into River Oaks
fitting
area.
for an industrial development guy.
And then on the other end, though, we have the home to NRG Stadium as well.
Yeah.
So it's a long street there. All right, Cullen Boulevard.
Cullen is an oil man, and the oil man who is also very much a benefactor to University of Houston, as well as establishing a foundation that was for medical education. Of course, medicine and education are a big thing here in Houston. I think it's interesting because he himself was not particularly highly educated, but very much valued it, made his money in oil, especially in the Houston area, so very fitting, and it was a major benefactor.
Yeah, and of course, Cullen runs right through 3rd Ward and the U of H area. Yeah. All right, Travis.
The Alamo, talk about a Texas hero. The guy dies in action, he wrote his final letter and he signs off the letter, victory or death. Well, the death part is what happened to him. He's a commander at the Alamo. Of course, he died at the Alamo. But certainly I'd say in historical memory, very much victorious. Hence the street name, very much a way to remember him.
There you go, just like Milam.
That's right, Milam, another war hero from the Texas Revolution. What's interesting about Milam is the fact that he actually initially helped Mexico separate from Spain. And then he helped Texas separate from Mexico. So he was doing multiple revolutions. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So really interesting war hero in kind of multiple ways, I would say, in the area.
Another way that streets got named, we have a couple of Chinatowns here in Houston. So you have one area when we had the Vietnamese come in, when Saigon fell, and then the streets are in Vietnamese, but then there's another area where the streets are actually in Mandarin, but both languages, but they also reflect those characters
streets
as well.
Can certainly change over time. You find that in New Orleans too, Spanish and French, the language changing over and streets changing over. Absolutely, you find that. Now, what's interesting, here in Houston, we're talking about different ways that streets get named. I mentioned obviously, the places, for example, people. Don't forget Sam Houston. You have the Sam Houston Tollway. That's an example of being named after people. That's not a practice only here. For example, James River, which is in the East Coast in the English-speaking world, which reminds me of the fact that streets were often named after rivers.
There's actually a James River Road. A friend of mine lives on it right here in town in a neighborhood.
That's right. Yeah, but remember, rivers are the highways of old. So rivers would get named just like streets do today. So for example, the Mississippi River. Well, a lot of Mississippian culture, American Indians were living along the Mississippi River. How about the Missouri River? It leads from the Montana region over to Missouri. That's how it gets its name, the destination. That's not that different than today, for example, the Gulf Freeway or the Katy Freeway, which go to Katy, go to the Gulf. You think about it's the same kind of idea. Or how about the song for Sheryl Crow? Till the sun comes up on the Santa Monica Boulevard. Now that's where I'm from, from LA, but Santa Monica Boulevard goes to Santa Monica. Yeah. So the destination.
If you're going the right direction.
If you're going the right direction, I guess that's true. So that's a practice that carries over from rivers. Rivers had that practice. Destinations do today. We name our freeways, as you mentioned here locally here as well. So all these practices are kind of still in place, whether it's people, destinations, the descriptions. How about the Red River, which looks red because of the soil? Or how about here in Houston, there's Telephone Road, which is where the old telephone lines were, which makes a lot of sense.
And then we know Georgia's known for peaches, but I get lost in Atlanta.
Oh, there's so many peach streets.
I'm like, is this Peach Street?
Peach Avenue, Peach Street, Peach Boulevard. You go crazy with all this stuff.
Peaches and cream. Wait, which street are you on?
So exactly, so good examples of descriptions. Yeah.
So I got curious, I started looking, and I found that in Houston, there's actually a Deborah Street. I don't know who it's named after, but I want to meet her. And there's also a Carlos Street. Carlos is our reporter and producer here on Great Day Houston. I looked it up, and there was Carlos as well. Sadly, when I was looking, there's no Raffi Street.
I got to make more of a mark here in Houston to get the Raffi Street on there.
Just remember Raffi Boulevard or Raffi Cul-de-sac, something. All right, Raffi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For more fun historical facts or to learn more about Raffi Andonian and talks he can do for your group on history, visit greatdayhouston.com, and he can do every topic there is.